Hey there! Thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris and welcome to a brand new LEGO Ninjago Legacy Look Back review, where I review the newest Ninjago Legacy set and compare it against its predecessor, or in this case, predecessors plural. This set right here is the 2021 Ultrasonic Raider for Ninjago Legacy. This right here is the 2016 Ultra Stealth Raider, which was a re-release for Day of the Departed and upgrade over the original vehicle. And all the way back here, we have the original 2012 Ultrasonic Raider. Without further ado, let's dive right into the review studio and take a look at the pros and cons of all three models, and see if the rumors are true about the 2021 version maybe not being as up to par as the older models. Let's take a look right now. Okay, so first up here we have the 2012 Ultrasonic Raider, and right here we have the 2016 Ultra Stealth Raider. The newest Legacy 2021 Ultrasonic Raider is kind of a combination of both of these, and actually most of the features are actually from the Ultra Stealth Raider, but just for the purposes of comparison and because this can barely fit within my actual review studio for all three, let's just compare them one by one first, and then we can have the final thoughts in the end. So, setting aside the Ultra Stealth Raider for now, let's just take a look at how the 2021 Ultrasonic Raider compares against the 2012 Ultrasonic Raider right here. So immediately you can see that obviously these are a very similar type of vehicle, they're supposed to be the same type, but of course this actually features a few more places for minifigures to sit. This original set also came with all four original Ninja, but one of the big downsides was that there's only seating space for 2 out of the 4 Ninja, which honestly in my opinion was a big missed opportunity for the original set. There's literally only space for 1 here and 1 here, so you basically have 2 out of the 4 Ninja just standing around just somewhere else around the set. So thankfully this set fixes it, and the Ultra Stealth Raider also fixes as well. You actually have 2 little sidecars here, so you can have 2 Ninja up in the main cockpits right here, but also 2 sitting on the side, which I think works out pretty well. Now both of these integrate a flyer feature and a transformation feature, and this one right here is super simple. This one is a little bit more complicated, but honestly, it's not necessarily better. So let's just set this one aside right now. I'm going to talk about the features of the original 2012 set right here. So this right here is a button you can push on the back. Pushing this button here causes the spikes to flay outwards in a pretty satisfying motion. This is actually a really cool looking motion. And then you can actually take this and cause it to fly off like so. So this by itself is a completely separate flyer, has its own jail cell right here to capture any prisoners, and you can actually move the angle of the wings by just moving around this bar here. Sure, it sometimes gets a little stuck and it does require a fair bit of force to push open and closed like so, but it is a pretty cool motion and something that looks very unique. It's very satisfying to have these all splay out like so. By contrast, when you look at what's left, I'm going to be completely honest, you can't really do anything with this. This is not really much of anything on its own. You got a back wheel and the 2 front treads, but this is just so open and gappy that honestly, I wouldn't even really do anything with this, and I usually just set it aside when I have the flyer fully deployed. That was a major problem with the original set and something they've actually fixed in the later iterations. So let's close this back up right here, which locks it in place. You'll notice I cannot move the top cockpit whatsoever when the wings are locked in place, and take a look at how this works for the Ultra Stealth Raider from 2016. So here is the Ultra Stealth Raider from 2016, and this has a very similar feature. So obviously you can see this is pretty locked in. I can't wiggle any of these around or anything. They're very much locked in when it's fully in the closed position. But now, when I push these back here, the wings can pop outwards, and then I can actually slide this out, detaching it from the front, and you have its own jet like so. Of course, the wings aren't nearly as involved or complex as the original set, but you still have a semblance of wings, as well as yet another jail cell in the back, which is a nice callback to the original set. So this on its own is a pretty decent looking flyer in my opinion, and could almost pass off as its own set. But that's not all, because you still have this part left over, and honestly, this by itself isn't too bad, but they actually made it a lot better, because first of all, You got these two side treads. Simply detach the side treads here, and you have two different motorcycles for the Ninja to ride. You've got this half tread, half bike kind of configuration, even some built-in suspension with them. Really fun to play around with, and these are actually also pretty decent on their own. You can almost see these being these side builds to some other sets, and they work very well as standalone vehicles, which is really great. So moving these out of the way, this final bit right here is not the only thing you can do with this, because you can move this all around upwards, and this turns into a massive motorcycle on its own. This also looks pretty fantastic, because what's really great about this model is that all of the builds, when it's completely separated, at least in my opinion, look pretty decent for being different parts to one set. Every single thing looks like it makes up a certain part of the vehicle, which I think was a major improvement over the 2012 version, which unfortunately had one pretty cool looking flyer, but everything left behind was not all too great. So let's put this back exactly how it should be. Super simple to do that. Let's pop this back in, slide in the flyer, and there you go. Very simple to reassemble this. Now let's look at how this was handled by the 2021 version. So right here, we've got the 2021 Ultrasonic Raider, and you may notice immediately there are a few things that are a little off about it, because first of all, this is super wobbly up in the front, so it kind of just wiggles back and forth, doesn't feel like it's staying in place, and it's very easy to accidentally flip it forwards and just kind of cause it to flop downwards. Honestly, not a big fan of how that works. This flyer up here also doesn't feel like it's attached to the front cockpit very well either, and this also just kind of wobbles around on its own. But let me just showcase exactly how the transformation feature works here. So you first have these wings folded in the back, and there's this big red button where if you press it, the wings fold out and you can actually move it outwards. Now unfortunately, this is not perfect. It's possible to actually get it stuck. If you close up the back wings too tight, it's literally really impossible and very difficult to actually force this down, which is a major flaw of the set itself. And something that I definitely know is not just an issue I've personally seen. A lot of people who reviewed this model have had the same exact issue. But moving this off, you can kind of wiggle it off, see it's just connected on two Technic pins there. This is a fairly decent flyer on its own. I actually kind of like the look of this and think it's a fairly unique build that works pretty well on its own, especially compared to some of the other builds. I really like the use of different angles here and the use of these tail fin pieces to form the sides of the cockpit, which I think is a pretty cool feature. But then let's look at what's left. So you still have this whole bit, which honestly doesn't look too bad on its own, I guess, but this is actually where some things start to change. So instead of taking the route of the Ultra Stealth Raider from 2016 and having these cars being mounted on the back here and having a bit of a middle section, they've actually made it such that you can separate these out entirely, have these be standalone objects, and then have this motorcycle work almost exactly how the 2016 one does, and just form the front wheel moving forwards like so. Unfortunately, the cockpit is still pretty wobbly on this larger motorbike here, but honestly I could kind of forgive it because this doesn't look half bad. It's a fairly decent motorcycle just on its own. What is pretty unfortunate though are these sidecars. So these are supposed to stand alone as their own thing, and honestly they're just not that cool looking because you have a really large tread here and you just have this embarrassingly tiny wheel on the other side. It really is kind of awkward as a build, and honestly one thing that I really wish that they did that probably could have made this much better is that if they just included a way to connect these two pieces here and have these work as some sort of a twin treaded vehicle. Having it work in conjunction like this, I feel, is a much better alternative to just having them be completely standalone, where it looks very awkward like they're two very clear halves of a sidecar and honestly don't work well at all on their own. So this is a major thing that I wasn't too happy about with the modern build, is just how these sidecars detach, because again, one of the great things about the 2016 version is that every single piece worked very well on its own. With these pieces very clearly do not work very well on their own. So let's just reassemble the craft here and take a look at all of them closed up like so. Okay, so you've got this all folded up, and To be honest, this isn't too bad. Like, I think the aesthetics are generally okay with this model. There's just a few things in play that make it an objectively worse play model, especially for a legacy set, which is typically supposed to improve upon the original set. Now the question is this an improvement over the 2012 version right here? And my answer is probably yes, because I think that the 2012 version, once you actually detach the flying craft here, you can't really do much with it. Sure, the flying craft looks alright on its own, but once you get rid of that, you can't do much with this whatsoever. With this, at least, you have the middle motorcycle, so there's 2 out of the 4 things that detach that look fairly good. The other thing is that this only splits in half versus the other version splitting in 4, which is definitely a major bonus for these models. That being said, though, the next question I have in mind is this at least as good of a model as the one that came out several years ago in 2016? And I think that, to me, the answer is a resounding no. Of course, this was a much more expensive set, so obviously you get a lot more detail in this and a lot more things that you can do. So I kind of want to step back and compare value a little bit here, because of course many people could say, well, this is a little bit more expensive than this, and as such has a lot more features packed into it. But here's the thing, this set right here, the 2012 version of the Ultrasonic Raider, retailed for $80 US in 2012. This roughly translates to around $93 US today. This set retailed for $100 back in 2016. That being said, it also included a substantial side build in the form of Chen's mini mech. So this had a completely separate side build on its own for $100. Now this, in 2021, we are back to the $80 price point, which again, is the same price point of the 2012 version. So I think the most comparable comparison up first would be these two. If you don't want to consider the Ultra Stealth Raider, at least let's compare these 2 models, and you can see that while a lot of people were saying that size was a lot smaller this time around, they're actually approximately the same size. When you put them on top of each other, they basically have almost identical footprints. The only major difference is the length. The length of the 2012 version is a little bit longer than the 2021 version. You can see just how far the back wheel here protrudes compared to the 2021 version, so it is a little bit more narrow, but I'm honestly feeling that these are approximately the same size and should be around the same value. So the question is, are these the same value? So honestly, I think it's fairly comparable between this and the 2012 version. One of my biggest problems, again, with the 2012 model was that once you detach the flyer, the whole base of this is basically useless. That kind of goes for this as well. Once you detach the flyer, the sidecars are basically useless, but thankfully you do have a fairly decent build for the middle motorcycle here to make up for it. But then that being said, it kind of balances out by being very wobbly, feeling like kind of poor construction, stuff just flopping down, and honestly, this does not feel like as solid of a toy than the original model. But then the question is, could they have actually made this better at the same price point? Again, you got the Ultra Stealth Raider here for $100 in 2016. And yes, this did come with a mech, so the mech, let's just say, is $10 to $15. That puts these 2 models approximately around the same price, but I'm getting a lot more value out of this. Not only is the Ultra Stealth Raider just so much larger than the 2021 or the 2012 versions, if I compare them right here, you'll notice it's just a lot larger than both of the models, but it also is just a much more cohesive toy. There's no wobbling going on with the front craft or the front cockpit here. They all stay in place despite having a very similar feature. And this one, I feel you could have probably easily solved it by just putting a clip on the front, just like they had a clip right here. So there's a lot of things that I feel could have been done better with this. And then the question is, would they have had enough parts budget to actually make these sidecar motorcycles act as actual motorcycles and not just weird sidecar builds? That is debatable, because at the $80 price point, maybe they had to cut a few corners and make these a little bit less involved than the previous version, but this is almost just better to not do it at all, because you can't really do much with just this. And there were a few ways they probably could have gotten a little bit more creative and combined these together that I feel were just missed out on. So all in all, is the 2021 Legacy Ultrasonic Raider a good set? It really depends to me personally. If you just want an Ultrasonic Raider and you don't own any of the previous ones, then I'd say maybe go for it because it's a very iconic Ninjago vehicle. I doubt they're going to do it again in recent history, and it's actually a fairly good representation if you ignore the wobbliness and if you just look at it all fully added together here. And then the question is though, is it a good model if you own the Ultra Stealth Raider? Probably not. The Ultra Stealth Raider is objectively a much better model than this can offer. Is it a good model if you only own the 2012 version? That one is also kind of up to you. You get a few different things like having actually two different builds in the model be workable when it's split. Of course, you get rid of the sidecars, which are basically useless. You have a pretty decent jet right here. And you have a fairly decent motorcycle as well, so these two are okay. But, of course, you can't really do much with these. They're very similar to the older platform where you couldn't do anything with it for 2012. And that's why, honestly, this feels like one of the weaker Ninjago Legacy sets to me. Typically with Ninjago Legacy, I expect major improvements over the original models. Stuff like the Fire Dragon, or the Monastery, where they took a model that wasn't honestly too great and made it into something fantastic. This here is definitely weakened by the fact that in 2016, we literally had the Ultra Stealth Raider, which was so much better and so much more of an improvement over the 2012 version that this just feels like a step backwards to me. Alright, and with that, we've summed up this look at the Ninjago Legacy Summer 2021 Ultrasonic Raider. Let me know down in the comments below, do you like this build? Do you wish it was a little bit closer to the Ultra Stealth Raider? And if so, what would you like to see changed? I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for tuning into DuckBricks. Be sure to stay tuned for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks, and bye-bye for now.